History Channel's live coverage of the House of Assembly today. Members expected to debate the National Training Agency bill, something first envisioned by Prime Minister Christie way back in his first administration between 2002 and 2007. The debate on that bill finally expected to begin this morning. We're going to hear from, obviously, the Labour Minister, who will have carriage of that, legal carriage of that responsibility for it in the government, the Honourable Shane Gibson. We know that Agatha Marcel, she was the former member for South Beach in that 2002-2007 Christie administration. She's expected to be the director of the National Training Agency. We're going to hear from Minister Gibson. Of course, we're going to hear from other members of the government as well as members of the opposition. We thought we'd talk to several people who are not part of the government or the opposition. Some regular people, as well as the president of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employees Confederation, Chester Cooper. Our Carla Palmer spoke with him and several members of the public several days ago. Let's listen to what they had to say.
For years now, employers have been recording their disappointment regarding the level of unpreparedness of employees coming into the workforce. The evidence of complaints lodged at the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employees Confederation head office on Shirley Street and Collins Avenue. Perhaps this could explain the high rate of unemployed persons under the age of 25 in the country, which now reportedly stands around 30%. Startling statistics, says Chairman of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employees Confederation, Mr. Chester Cooper, who notes that this absentee space influences heavily the economic and social outlook of the Bahamas. For these and other reasons, he says, he supports and applauds the government for introducing the National Training Agency.
The need for good quality employees at all levels, notwithstanding the high unemployment rate, is often something that CEOs and employers generally complain about. It seems, regrettably, a persistent complaint that employers cannot find adequately skilled and qualified workers. So I trust that whilst the National Training Agency focuses on developing of skills for employees, we also focus on development of the appropriate attitudes for employees. I don't believe employers when they say that they can't find workers on the basis of the unemployment rate, but clearly they are speaking to this old mantra that everybody wants a job, but they don't necessarily want to work. So this is the area that I believe the National Training Agency should focus on.
The Chamber Chairman for a year is well qualified academically with years of practical experience to boot. He also holds the position of President and Chief Executive Officer at BA Financial and Insurance Company. He's eager to work with the government on the National Training Agency, saying better collaboration between the government and the private sector is what's needed for improved impact of the country's development. In fact, he's calling for a skills gap assessment survey to be conducted to determine the specific skills that are missing.
The government can facilitate the discussion by telling the private sector what areas there may be work permits being applied for example, and can also give us more information with respect to the specific opportunities that's coming on stream. Bahamas, for example, it would be extremely helpful for employers or employees, prospective employees, to know what jobs and in what quantity of those jobs will be coming available. Are there engineering jobs? Are there pastry chef jobs? What areas can people work on to become more adept in the hotel sector, for example, to ensure that they can fill some of the jobs that's becoming available. So by and large, the National Training Agency is a good initiative. The Chamber supports it. No doubt the other employers associations are supported as well, because we want to see advancement in terms of our labor force. and we certainly want to be able to attract the quality of employees that we need at all levels.
As a prominent stakeholder, Mr. Cooper says the Chamber will be proactive in tabling its suggestions to the government in the interest of seeking a more harmonious, productive, and successful outcome with respect of the National Training Agency.
We will certainly be speaking with the government in terms of what we see as some of the needs, what we see as some of the direction and the queries that we've gotten from employers. We have a Chamber Institute that do training for employers and many associations. We've been developing training initiatives and programs specific to certain sectors. So we'll be happy to share with the government all of the information we have, all of the direct feedback we get from the associations and various employers to help to make the National Training Agency the most impactful and the most practical in terms of its objectives.
With small and medium-sized businesses regarded by many leading economists and financial experts as the engine that drives the economy, Mr. Cooper heralds the view that growing the entrepreneurial base is the way forward.
Many of the persons who are not employed or underemployed may have the right aptitude, they may have the right attitude to be entrepreneurs, and we know that small business sector drives the economy. We know that in most countries 72% of employees are in the small business sector. So there is opportunity to make Bahamians owners, make them entrepreneurs, more than simply just being a worker or having a job. So this is the focus of my mandate this year at the Chamber, to focus more on the development of small business, and I hope this can work hand in hand with the government and the National Training Agency.
These residents, Lydia Williams and Ali Charles, expressed their vested interest.
I think it's a good idea, but my thoughts are that I think it should be implemented in the school, maybe from the 11th grade to the 12th grade, so when they leave school, they will already have these skills to go into the workplace.
If they're young, they still have the, childish mind and stuff like that. So if they get a proper training, they can teach them like that.
The National Training Agency is forecasted to come on stream sometime next month. For the Parliamentary Channel, I'm Carla Palmer.
Some reaction from the business community on the one hand and members of the public on the other about the National Training Agency that will be debated today and has been talked about by Prime Minister Christie for at least 10 years now. That training agency is not only going to be charged with training, but it will also act as a placement agency as well. And we talk about training, and we've all heard the cry and the complaint that we don't have enough trained Bahamians to do a lot of the jobs that are not only available now, but that will become available certainly when the Bahamas project comes online at the end of next year, 2014. Bahamas has its own training facilities program, but the National Training Agency, again, is the government's way, one of the government's ways in saying, listen, we are not going to allow any company to use the excuse that Bahamians are not trained for these positions that will become available. Bahamas, of course, is just one of those places where, according to those projects announced by Mr. Christie, where Bahamians are going to be needed. Again, we know what is supposed to happen in Grand Bahama with the Reef Village, and another arrangement made with the Grand Lucine for something to happen there, and of course the casino, that Isle of Capri that has been non-functional really, and other investments and projects that we've heard about not only from Mr. Christie but mentioned briefly by the Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Obi Roscom, who also happens to be the member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini. Talking about Bimini, of course, Friday, this coming Friday, June 28th, Prime Minister Christie is expected to open the Resorts World Casino there from Genting, the Genting Company. One of several projects he announced for Bimini, again, expecting to need a lot of labor. And so, again, we talk about the importance of this national training agency. Who is going to be on the board of this national training agency? And according to this bill, and remember now, it's not been debated and passed as yet, but according to the bill, on the board will be representatives of the Department of the Public Service, the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, the Bahamas Hotel Association, the Chambers of Commerce, Urban Renewal, and the labor unions. Again, we know who are those persons who are going to be involved in this. Would be a lot of those persons who are members of the trade unions. And, of course, you want somebody there from Education, Science and Technology. This is teaching, after all. And, of course, the Ministry of Labor and the Public Service, these, whomever these people are, who will be charged with the training at the National Training Agency, they will, of course, be members of the public service as well. This is planned to be a semi-autonomous body, but again, will still be under the purview of the government of the Bahamas. Government of the Bahamas. 40 years ago, and we always talk about this, so I want to get it in here now before members begin debate on this National Training Agency bill. What were they doing 40 years ago in the House of Assembly? Well, one more day, the 27th, would be the final day of the meeting of the House of Assembly before they would break for independence. First independence here, 1973. And so they would break on the 27th of June and would not return until October of 1973. But the days leading up to the 27th, the 25th, the 20th of June, members in the House dealing with several things. One name who's still with us, very active in activities that were going on around that time. Arrington Watkins, he was the member for Marsh Harbor. And of course, at that initially, he was elected as a member of the Free National Movement. By the time the House broke for the independence celebrations, he had removed himself from being aligned with the Free National Movement, and he'd also, on behalf of those who wanted the Free Abaco movement, the secession movement, he conceded defeat on their behalf as well. But members also had passed a bill to regulate the Bahamas flag, the coat of arms, the Prime Minister's flag, and of course the Governor General's flag. Some of the things they were doing back in 1973. But members are preparing to begin this morning's session, and so let's join them and the invocation from the Reverend Pastor Hugh Roach.
Property, his money, his children, almost lost his wife in the process. But then he did not know that behind all the tests was somebody called Satan, the devil, putting him through these tests and only allowed by God to happen. And the good thing about the story is that it asks a lot of questions, and I want to take a few of those in the next few times we meet. The first one this morning is found in the 4th chapter and the 17th verse. Can a mortal man be more righteous than God? Can a man be more pure than his Maker? God is love, God is mercy, God is just. But it's a terrible thing to fall in the hands of an angry God. There's justice. There is justice. I repeat, there is justice. In addition to that love, there's justice, discipline, rewards, and punishment. And from where you good ladies and gentlemen sit, there's some of our people who need some of both. And I ask you to consider them as you visit, as you accept their calls, as we by God's grace try to get our nation right. And if you follow what God says, you can't go wrong. Then nobody loves us more than God himself. Let us pray. O God, our Heavenly Father, we hallow your name this morning because of your goodness and your greatness, your merciful kindness to us, your humble children. We thank you for our Commonwealth and for our people scattered throughout these islands. In thy merciful kindness, remember them today, O Lord, especially the young people who are finishing scholastic activities, looking for summer work, preparing to go on to college and university. We ask your blessing on our nation. Bless the leaders of the country, Lord, in whatever capacity they serve, wherever they are. But in particular, we ask your blessing on this honorable house today. Be with our speaker, grant him the wisdom and the patience of Job to deal with the matters at hand. And bless us in our contributions, that we will be mindful of each other, knowing that in the final analysis we are our brothers' keepers and our sisters' keepers. Hear our prayer and breathe on us the spirit of wisdom this day, we ask, in the name of Jesus, who taught us to pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. Firstly, I'd like to thank Pastor Roach once again for your exhortation. We appreciate it, sir. And I thank you for your prayer for the patience of Job and the presiding officer. Appreciate that very much. Welcome today's sitting of Parliament. Today is Wednesday, the 26th of June, in the year of our Lord 2013. And I welcome you to this new sitting of Parliament. In our pursuit of making laws for the people, for the peace, order, and good governance of our nation, we intend to debate the National Training Agency Bill, a bill for an act to establish the National Training Agency, to develop a competency-based training and job placement system and for connective purposes, and the Insurance Amendment Bill to identify liquidators against financial liability. Before we commence, though, I'd like to seek your indulgence for the following communication. Firstly, I'd like to apologize for the absence of the member for Fox Hill, who sends his regrets due to the CARICOM mission trip to the Turks and Caicos Islands in his capacity as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration. Secondly, the Garden Hills Community Outreach invites all Garden Hills constituents and the general public to join us at our monthly Garden Hills branch meeting to be held tomorrow evening, that's Thursday, at 7:30 p.m. at SC McPherson Junior High School. Kindly contact our offices at 325-2000 for further information. That's tomorrow evening at 7:30. Be also advised that on Friday, this coming Friday, the 28th of June, in celebration of the 40th Independence Anniversary, Pat's Senior Citizens Home and Daycare Center, in conjunction with the Garden Hills constituency and outreach, would like you to join us for a special celebratory luncheon to be held from 12 noon to 2 p.m. for all senior citizens of Garden Hills. Pat's Senior Citizens Home is located on Soldier Road, and all interested seniors should contact the Garden Hills Outreach at 325-2000 for further information and or to arrange special transportation. As a general reminder, all children and young persons interested in the Garden Hills Summer Camp to be held in conjunction with the South Beach Police Station, Southwest Division. The camp commences Monday the 1st of July 2013 until the 9th of August from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Interested persons should also contact the Garden Hills Outreach Office at 325-2000 to properly register, and refreshments will be served. Honorable members, underneath the dark, billowing smoke that could be seen throughout New Providence skyline just recently was below a deadly incinerator made up of multiple mini explosions and raging flames that threatened the very existence of much of the eastern end of Garden Hills. So was the towering inferno on Monday evening. To date, there's been no report of injuries as a result of the inferno. However, the health-related aftermath would be determined in time. Property damage to Strawn's Auto was immense, and smoke damage to adjoining homes are presently under examination. As we await the official cause of the blaze and the aftermath, I would like to go on record to thank and show appreciation to the businesses in the area, including Dozier Heavy Equipment and also Strawn's Auto and several other businesses, but most especially the residents and of the community of Garden Hills who band together to assist each other with buckets, hoses, dirt, tractors, and just about anything they could find. And just being there in presence with manpower made a difference and finally extinguished the blaze after 7 to 8 hours. The finality could easily have been catastrophic, but thanks be to God, the winds blew high and away from the majority of the houses, and the inferno was controlled just in time. The much overworked officers of the Fire Division and most of the top senior officers of the Royal Bahamas Police Force rose to the occasion and served with professionalism. Our collective thanks to them and the fire officers from the Defense Force, NEMA, Airport Authority, and many others served with distinction. Bahamians certainly know how to work together in a crisis. On a general note, we must proactively seek to place strategically located and proper functioning fire hydrants throughout New Providence, especially in areas where access may be difficult. Secondly, we must invest in the necessary assortment of fire trucks and firefighters. Otherwise, we will all continue to be on a wing and a prayer. Finally, the owner of Strawn's Auto is certainly interested in meeting with officials to discuss the way forward and to bring closure to the matter. Our people deserve this. Honorable members, on a lighter note, for those politicians who can't get enough of the Heat victory and the difficult Lakers season, you have another opportunity. On Saturday, July 20th, at 7:30 p.m., the 18th annual Nelson Cooper Celebrity Basketball Game will be held at the Kendall G.L. Isaacs Gymnasium. I urge you to prepare yourselves for a once-in-a-lifetime victory against the Pastors. After much contemplation, I will reappoint myself as head coach. This is free of charge. I have also appointed members for Pinewood to serve as captain, and he will be ably assisted by the member for North Eleuthera. Other drafted members are the member for North Abaco, member for Golden Isles, member for Exuma, Ragged Island, the member for Kalani, the member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador. And we certainly deserve help and hope from all other politicians across the length and breadth. All wannabe politicians can join us in this place or the other place. So it's July 20th at 7:30 p.m. Kindly contact Captain, the member for Pinewood, for practice opportunities. Finally, honorable members, the recent shooting of Garden Hill's born and bred Sergeant Andy Sweeting brought mixed emotions as I contemplated the question, what if? On one hand, as I met with him yesterday in hospital, I was comforted by his tenacity, but more importantly, by the grace that God extended his life. He sends his best wishes to all. But on the other hand, we must also ask ourselves in this country, what will it take to stop the madness? Animals are born with no conscience, no will, or limited intelligence, so they are accustomed to kill their own and eat their young. Yet we as a people are intelligent beings, members of the human race. We espouse the gift of life and the rule of law. Yet we too are eating our own with reckless abandon. This madness must stop. The experiences of Superintendent Clayton Fernanda, now Sergeant Sweeting, demonstrates to us that we are all vulnerable unless and until we say collectively, enough is enough. So my appeal is and will always be, firstly, to the leaders, that we will always be seen as we are in the seat of power, to me, to you, and to us together. We must become the change we seek, and that change must come from our lips in debate to our hearts to effect change in our actions. The children are indeed watching, and our actions are speaking much louder than our words. So let us work together from this place and leave these hallowed chambers expecting the change we desire where it really counts. Not in here, but outside in our homes and in our streets. And now to the order of business of the day. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes honorable member for Bain and Grandstand.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table following the Police Force Fees for Service Regulations 2013 and the Firearms Forms and Fees Amendment Rules 2013.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes honorable member for Bain and Grandstand.
I'd like to lay on the table on behalf of the Minister for Social Services and Community Development, the Child Protection Juvenile Court's panel, additional members from New Providence and Grand Bahama Order 2013.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes honorable member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House copies of the following: the Price Control General Amendment Number 5, Regulations 2013, the Price Control General Amendment Number 6, Regulations 2013.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you.
Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes Honourable Member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House copies of the following. The Industries Encouragement Approved Product Purity Bakery Limited Order 2013. The Industries Encouragement Approved Manufacturer Purity Bakery Limited Order 2013. The Industries Encouragement Approved Product Bahamas Striping Limited Order 2013. And the Industries Encouragement Approved Manufacturer Bahamas Striping Limited Order 2013.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for South and Central Eleuthera.
Morning, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. The Interpretation and General Clauses Act, Delegation of Powers of the Registrar General, number 2 notice, 2013.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Golden Isles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Passenger Tax Act Amendment to First Order 2013.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Thank you, Honourable Members. Statements and communication by ministers. Yeah. Communication by the clerk.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to report delivery to the Honourable Senate of messages 13 and 14.
Thank you, clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Messages 13, 14, and 15 were received. There's been amendment to message 13, would read as follows. The Senate acquaint the Honourable Speaker of the message 14 is an amendment. The Senate acquaint the Honourable Speaker of the Honourable House of Assembly that they have consented to the following bills accompanying the message of the Honourable House number 13, dated 18th of June 2013, having made the following amendments to the Stamp Amendment Bill 2013 and the Real Property Tax Amendment Bill 2013. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign, seat, and new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for North Andros and the Berries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following: a bill for an act to amend the Pharmacy Act and for connected purposes.
Order that the bill be brought up. Do we have a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Pharmacy Act and for connected purposes. As many are in favor that the bill be read a first time will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Pharmacy Act and for connected purposes.
For the first reading of bills. The chair recognizes honorable member for South and Central Eleuthera.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following. A bill for an act to amend the Supreme Court Act to provide for an increase in the number of justices.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the bill be brought up.
In the folder.
Do we have a second? Second. It has been moved and seconded the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Supreme Court Act to provide for the increase in the number of justices. As many are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Supreme Court Act to provide for an increase in the number of justices.
For the first reading of bills. Thank you, honorable member. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes honorable member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to be in this honorable place once again, representing the wonderful constituents from the great constituency of Golden Gates. Mr. Speaker, it gives me added pleasure to move this second reading in the middle of bill to establish the National Training Agency. Mr. Speaker, this is very significant for more than one reason. I believe all of us are aware of the high levels of unemployment and also equally aware of the many opportunities that avails itself to many Bahamians, and for a number of reasons they are unable to take advantage of these. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is something that is actually long overdue. And when we were last in office between 2002 and 2007, at that time I had the pleasure of serving as the Minister of Labor, Immigration, and Training. And it was through the vision of the then Prime Minister that he saw the need to establish a national training agency. Of course, we had already begun the process before we lost the election in 2007. And because of the short-sightedness of the incoming administration at that time, they didn't see the need to continue on with it, even though we had these major projects on the drawing board that would have demanded many workers to be trained in a way that they would be able to take care of the jobs from the bottom right up to the top. And so I guess it was because it was a PLP's initiative. At that time, they scrapped it. We had already, Mr. Speaker, appointed Ms. Agatha Marcel as director. She had a contract already drawn up. I believe it may have even been signed, but not executed. And immediately upon assuming office, one of the first things they did was to cancel anything to do with the National Training Agency. Of course, Mr. Speaker, they sought to implement some form of training at a time when they thought it was expedient to do so, when they were looking to see how many votes they can garner coming into the 2012 elections. And so they hurriedly created some haphazard training program that I think anybody who participated in the program, and I spoke with several of the instructors who participated in the program at that time, and they all agreed, Mr. Speaker, that the program was ineffective. It didn't accomplish its expected goals. And as a matter of fact, I was told that you have some persons who were not compensated, who were instructors, and up to this day, because it wasn't properly handled, they are still trying to see how they can be compensated. Mr. Speaker, before I get into the substantive bill, I believe that the persons who raised this issue with me would really not forgive me if I didn't speak to the issue of that happened here in this honorable place a couple weeks ago between the member for Long Island and the member for Port Charlotte, Mr. Speaker. Because persons, they blew my email right up, talking about how disgraceful and despicable it was, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they just couldn't understand how leaders of this country could be pushed to a point where they would justify physically attacking somebody. They couldn't understand that, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Golden Gates, just to caution you, the matter was dealt with in this place by the chair.
No, Mr. Speaker,
closure was brought to that.
But Mr. Speaker, I understand and I respect that. But the point is this, Mr. Speaker. I represent the wider public. Not only those who live in Golden Gates, but once I'm elected to Parliament, I represent everybody. Because we come in here and we pass laws, we implement policies for the betterment of everybody in the country. And I don't see how, Mr. Speaker, that my voice could be muzzled, right, to speak on an issue that is so important, particularly when you look at the state of crime in the country. And every day, Mr. Speaker, I have an opportunity to speak to students, particularly at the Michael Primary School. Every time I speak to them about discipline, about being patient, about control, about not being quick to react and quick to respond, and about conflict resolution, Mr. Speaker. That's important. And we are now talking about trying to train a workforce, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that they are disciplined enough to take advantage of every possible opportunity to be employed, Mr. Speaker. I hired a couple of persons the other day, Mr. Speaker, and they showed up the way they were supposed to work from 7 until 5. So I got there 4:15 one day. They were packed up and ready to go. And they couldn't understand why it is they couldn't leave the job. They were being paid by the hour, not by the day. They couldn't understand why it is they couldn't leave the job an hour early. What's the big deal? It's only an hour. And so I sent somebody to check the next morning, and at 7:15 they got there, and they were eating breakfast. Eating breakfast at 7:15. During the first hour they come to work, they're eating breakfast. And so when I raised the issue, they just couldn't understand what's the big deal, And so when you take away an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, that's 2 hours. That's 10 hours a week. That's only one person, right? And that's not the rest of them who were all, because it was about 5 or 6 of them. And so all of them, Mr. Speaker, that's 2 hours a day. And the thing is, they didn't see it as a big deal, right? Now, some of us may not see it as a big deal what happened inside here. But me personally, Mr. Speaker, I see it as a big deal. Because we are the leaders. We are the ones who are supposed to be setting an example for others to follow. We are talking now about persons, you can imagine right now if I were to walk outside and, people abuse me verbally every day, Mr. Speaker. Nobody abused me more than the other side. Nobody. I remember, Mr. Speaker, walking up on the platform in Golden Gates when I was being nominated. Verbally abuse, I'm talking about, verbal abuse. And Mr. Speaker, you know what is more frightening and scary about this whole thing? Is they all supported what was done. All. Listen to them justify it. Watch when they get up and talk to Mr. Speaker. They all justify it.
Member from Golden Gate. Member for Golden Gate. Member for Kalani, take your seat. Member for Kalani, take your seat. Member Central Grand Bahamas, take your seat. Thank you. I apologize. Member for Central. Member for Golden Gates, the chair is not going to allow it. We're not going to deal with that any further. The chair has made a decision. And the decision was made, the member has every right to discuss matters in generalities. But specifically as it relates to that incident, the chair is not prepared to deal with that in this place. It did not happen in this place.
Mr. Speaker, happen right here. Mr. Speaker, right here.
The chair has made a ruling. The chair has made a ruling, and the chair is not changing that. That's the way it is.
Mr. Speaker,
we're not going to deal with that in this place, member for Golden Gate.
Mr. Speaker,
members, I would prefer that the heckling would cease and desist.
Mr. Speaker, my point is this, right? Is I was sent to represent the people. Now, when we have individuals, Mr. Speaker, who condone the actions of violence, Mr. Speaker, I think it's despicable. When you have leaders who refuse to condemn individuals who may attack people personally in a physical way, Mr. Speaker, just because of and Mr. Speaker, if I put, and I'm speaking very general right now, if I put my arm around Ryan and say, Ryan, man, take it easy, man. Right? And Ryan said to me, Shane.
Member for Elizabeth.
Oh, sorry, member for Elizabeth, take it easy, man. And he said to me, Shane, I know you faking it. You don't really want me to take it easy. You faking it. You did not give Ryan a right, member for Elizabeth the right to slap me, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Golden Gates. Member for Golden Gates. Member for Golden Gates.
I'm speaking hypothetically. I'm speaking member for Elizabeth.
Member for Golden Gates, resume your seat. We are dealing with the bill for the National Training Agency. I think the Bahamian people would agree that it's a necessary bill. The chair is very much interested in your presentation. We've dealt with that matter before. The chair refused to deal with it or to allow any member in this place to deal with it any further. So I encourage you strongly to just continue with your presentation.
With all due respect, Mr. Speaker, the biggest problem that we have in this country is attitudes of individuals on the job. We had a survey done the other day when they said that 60% of the persons who lost their jobs lost it because of attitude. Attitude. And I can't draw a reference to terrible attitudes that I see. Something must be wrong about that. Something must be wrong. The article was in the paper the other day, 60% of all persons who lost their jobs, they were qualified, they knew their jobs, they were, some of them got high levels of education, master's, bachelor's degrees, doctorate, PhD, overqualified, but had terrible attitudes, Mr. Speaker. And that is a part of what the National Training Agency is seeking to do, to try and reform and transform and change the attitude, the mindset, and create a paradigm shift of attitudes of individuals in the workforce, Mr. Speaker. And so in general, I condemn it. I believe that persons, Mr. Speaker, seeking to be employed should be very careful as to how they conduct themselves prior to, during working hours, and even after working hours, Mr. Speaker. Because at the end of the day, no matter where you are, somebody is always watching, and whatever you do, always have a way of coming to light where a person's reference, listen here, you want me to hire you? You know the same young man I see fighting down the street the other day, where you walk up an individual and slap them for no reason, Mr. Speaker? People would say that, employers would say that. And so people put things on Facebook. They have these fights all the time, but these are the same kids who, after scrapping in the schoolyard, would walk in the establishment and say, listen here, I'm looking for a job. But you said, you're the same person I saw on the internet last night, all over YouTube, rolling around in the dirt, physically attacking another individual. Now you come to my establishment looking for a job. So, Mr. Speaker, all I'm saying is persons have to be very careful, Mr. Speaker, very careful. Mr. Speaker, now this National Training Agency that we are establishing, the agency itself will not be doing the training. It is an assessment, referral agency, Mr. Speaker, who will be assessing individuals, and they will be actually taking advantage of all of the many institutions, Mr. Speaker, throughout the Bahamas, and we will get into that about how you go through the accreditation process, and you're able to provide training once you are certified and accredited by the training agency. Mr. Speaker, The bill has normal interpretations where you look at accreditation, defining accreditation, accredited training providers, where we look at establishing the agency itself, meaning the National Training Agency, all of the articulation, Mr. Speaker, which is the formal agreements between agencies accredited as training providers. We have assessors defined, the assessment, the board, which is the National Training Agency, would have a board that actually oversees all of its policies and procedures and the establishment. We have, Mr. Speaker, the chairman of the board. We have competency standards that's defined. We have an executive director, Mr. Speaker, who will be appointed, who will be the overall administrator of the board. We have inspectors, Mr. Speaker, persons who are authorized to act as inspectors on behalf of the agency. We have the minister, which is defined as the minister responsible for labor. We have the programs, which means the approved curriculum, composed of a series of courses, of course. We have the quality assurance, we have qualifications, we have recognition of prior learning, and of course registration. Mr. Speaker, this bill, as I said, established the agency and allowed it to have its own common seal. It lists out the functions of the agency, Mr. Speaker, which is to prepare and implement plans for the workforce vocational training in accordance with the national policies. You have a whole list of functions of the agencies, including to engage in activities geared towards increasing the capacity of individuals to participate effectively in the workforce. And Mr. Speaker, I must say that when we talk about the participation in this agency, we are talking about various levels. Where you have persons who come in who may be high school dropouts, persons who for some reason or other couldn't survive high school, didn't graduate, don't have any BJCs, any BGCSEs, any formalized training even after high school. All of these persons, Mr. Speaker, will be accepted in the agency. And so you will notice that in the agency we have different tiers, from tier 1 straight up to tier 7, which is supervisory and managerial personnel. But the idea is to allow for all persons of all levels in the society to be able to apply to the agency. And let me just say, Mr. Speaker, that the agency initially was supposed to be launched this coming Friday, but of course there's $100 million development in Bimini this Friday, where the Prime Minister will be officially launching that development. And I think they'll be launching the vessel, a cruise ship, ferry-type vessel, 250-odd feet, that will be ferrying passengers between Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Bimini. And he is scheduled to open that event. And so we've decided to postpone the official launch of the agency to Monday, July 15th. And so for all of those persons who are excited about coming to launch this Friday, we're sorry to disappoint you, but we're now looking at, we now have a confirmed date for the launch of the agency, which is Monday, July the 15th. Of course, we also have in the bill powers of the agency. The agency may fix fees and charges for services to and by the agency. And so even though, Mr. Speaker, persons entering at tier 1, I think through maybe tier 3 or 4 won't be required to pay any fees. When you get into higher tiers and the more qualified individuals, there may be a fee that's fixed for individuals to pay for those services. Mr. Speaker, I also must mention, in addition to the actual training institutions that will be providing the services, when we look at the apprenticeship program that we will have in the agency, we have already started speaking with individuals who will be allowing the apprentices, and I must say that there are 4 core areas that we're looking at first, Mr. Speaker. We're looking at hospitality and tourism. We're looking at retail operations. We're looking at auto sales and service, care, and office procedures. And so when you look at the apprenticeship program, for instance, somebody who want to be an auto mechanic, and they are part of the apprenticeship program, one of the local dealers will have a fee fixed with them, where we will pay them a fee, and they will be able to accommodate X amount of individual trainees in the program to be trained as apprentices on site, having hands-on practical experience. And so in addition to the training institutions that exist now and those that will come up and be accredited by the National Training Agency that we would use. We would also be using the private sector companies for apprentices to be attached to those as well. The agency will also have the power, Mr. Speaker, to invest to financial resources, to receive and administer funds donated or entrusted to the agency by any other agency or organization for the purpose relating to the training or employment of persons. Mr. Speaker, that's important because you would have noticed that during the budget debate, individuals were concerned about the amount of money initially allocated to the National Training Agency that was $1 million, significantly reduced to, I think it was just over $300,000. Well, the fact of the matter is that a lot of the monies will be raised through private donors. And we have already had commitments from major employers who have already agreed to make monetary contributions. And so in addition to the monies that will be paid into the agency directly by the consolidated fund, monies will also be raised from the private sector. And the monies that will be raised for the private sector will be for operations and training, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the government is committed to paying the rent for the agency, I think, for the next year. And eventually, as was done with other authorities, eventually we would wean ourselves, the agency would wean themselves completely off of the consolidated fund, and all of the monies will be generated through private donors. Or in the case of some other countries, I think like Jamaica, they attach a small fee to the national insurance of maybe $1 per person, or 1%, or $1 per person that would go towards it. We have not decided to do that. But I believe that once we're able to raise all the money through private contributions and private donations from corporate Bahamas, then there won't be a need for us to come back to the consolidated fund or place any sort of levy on individuals to raise funds for this, Mr. Speaker. The agency would also have the power to enter into arrangement with institutions for the establishment, implementation, monitoring, and financing of training or employment programs, Mr. Speaker, amongst other things. They have the powers to withdraw or cancel accreditation, approval or recognition of certificates. Mr. Speaker, that's important because some individuals believe that once you accredit the institution, that they're accredited for life. Even though the standards may drop over a period of time, or the agency may not be satisfied with what they see coming out of the particular institution. And so even though you may be accredited today, that's where the inspectors come in, where they will come and they would monitor and they would provide us with reports. And if we see where your standards are declining and you are not providing the type of service that you committed to provide or we expect you to provide, then of course we can always, or the agency can always withdraw their accreditation. Mr. Speaker, there should also be a constitutional procedure for the board. As I said before, you'll have the board of directors of the agency, and the board shall be the governing body for the agency. Mr. Speaker, and of course the minister, you'll have in the constitution where the minister may order and amend any schedule that's provided. Of course, the duties of the board will be to formulate the policies of the agencies, to ensure policies are implemented and enforced, to manage the financial resources and assets of the agency, and manage the fees and charges for services provided to and by the agency. Mr. Speaker, this is important because, you know, some boards misunderstand their functions. And I remember when I was an employee at Batelco, you had board members who actually used to walk around and try to manage the operations of BTC. You know, because they didn't realize that board members, that wasn't a part of their function and responsibilities. And I think even today, you still have some board members who still believe that they could actually reach right down in an organization and actually try to manage the organization when that is not their responsibility. That's the responsibility of management. And so it is very clear in this legislation as to the functions of the board. Of course, you will have officers and employees of the board as well. I mentioned before the director, the person who will be in charge, and the board is able to make all appointments except those appointments above certain levels. You would want the minister's concurrence, similar to what happens in most of the quasi-government institutions today. Mr. Speaker, that's important because we see now where in many of the government-owned corporations, you have executive management whose salaries have sort of gotten out of hand. And even though many of the corporations wouldn't want ministers to have any say as to what happens, I could tell you if ministers played a direct role in most cases, abuses that you see happening in these public corporations in terms of salaries and compensation and bonuses and all that, they probably wouldn't happen. But in most cases, management is able to work out arrangements with the board where the board themselves, with any reference to ministers, are able to improve on these benefits. Mr. Speaker, it speaks further to the financial provisions and funds and resources of the agency. It talks about some sums, such sums as may be appropriated by Parliament, as I said before, and sums from grants, from donations, and other persons. Of course, in some instances, it requires the permission of the minister to agree, because sometimes, Mr. Speaker, you may find that persons, for the wrong reason, may agree to make certain contributions to these agencies, quasi-government agencies, and they use the contributions to manipulate certain situations. And of course, when they're accepting certain gifts, Mr. Speaker, they don't look at the general implications of the gift. For instance, they may donate to you this wonderful piece of technology. They don't look at the maintenance of it. And so you agree to accept a donation, Mr. Speaker, for the agency, and at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, you don't look at the wider implications as to what it would cost you to maintain the gift that you accept. So in some cases, these gifts would have to be approved by the minister, just to make sure we have a total picture and make sure we don't have any conflict of interest that may arise. The bill also provides for the establishment of a pension. It gives the agency the powers to borrow money, to create a national insurance fund, the National Training Agency Fund, to submit a budget, prepare a budget that should be submitted to the minister at least 2 months prior to the commencement of the financial year. And of course, it provides for the accounts to be audited and for the auditor to be appointed by the minister in consultation with the agency. It also allows for the transfer of assets, the construction of laws and contracts. It allows for the registration, Mr. Speaker, of providers. As I said before, all providers, anybody who wants to provide any service to the agency, National Training Agency, can register with the agency, and once the agency accredits them, then they're able to provide the service. It provides for the registration of trainees. Just let me say, Mr. Speaker, that once we launch on July 15th, a week afterwards, then of course we will begin to accept applications for anybody wanting to participate in the training agency. And so what we will do is we will have applications at all of the urban renewal offices. We'll have applications at the National Training Agency, which will be housed in a building on the corner of Gladstone Road and Munnings Road. And so for individuals, once you hear the launch on the 15th, a week afterwards, you will be able to make application to participate as a trainee in the National Training Agency. It speaks about eligibility for selection as a trainee. Of course, I said that the designation of the inspectors and the powers of the inspectors. The minister, Mr. Speaker, can also make regulations. And of course, this act binds the Crown. Mr. Speaker, the board itself of the agency will consist of the executive director, who will be ex officio, and 7 members appointed by the minister after consultation with the relevant public and private organizations as represented below, which are the representatives from the Department of Public Service, representatives from the Ministry of Labor, from the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, representatives of the Bahamas Hotel Association, the Chamber of Commerce, from Urban Renewal, and also representatives from the trade unions. Mr. Speaker, a member other than an ex-officio member of the agency shall hold office for a period not exceeding 3 years and not less than 1 year, but should be eligible for reappointment. So all persons who are appointed to the board can be appointed for a minimum of 1 year, a maximum of 3 years, and they'll all be eligible to be reappointed. Of course, it makes provision for the regular resignation and removal of board members. And of course, in most cases, Mr. Speaker, these board members sacrifice a lot of time. And so, not in all cases, but in this particular case, in other cases, board members can also be compensated. So there will be remuneration allotted for to compensate board members. And it speaks to how often the board should meet, which is at least once a month, which is important. And in cases where they have to meet more than once a month, of course, that's always allowed, but they have to meet at least once a month. It also talks about the powers of the board to invite persons to attend meetings. And what's important as well is it speaks to declaration, a member of the board or any committee appointed to the board who's directly or indirectly interested in a contract or proposed contract or has any interest in a matter under consideration by the board or any committee thereof shall disclose the fact at the next meeting of the board or committee and shall not participate in the consideration or vote on any question relating to that matter. That's important, Mr. Speaker, because sometimes because you find these board members from the wider community, and the community is so small that oftentimes it's not said that you cannot do it, but certainly if there is an instance where there is a potential conflict, then it should be brought to attention at the next board meeting, and members should, if members know that there's a potential conflict, they should not participate in the voting of these contracts, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, that's basically the legislation that governs the establishment of the National Training Agency, Mr. Speaker. And I think that it's important for me to reiterate, Mr. Speaker, what the agency is all about, to speak a bit about Sitting Guilds, who is a recognized, competent international agency who would certify and accredit the agency and allow the certificate to be recognized, Mr. Speaker, worldwide. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, the National Training Agency is a competency-based training and job placement system that is flexible and responsive to the actual requirements of the workplace through a network of suitable training institutions, organizations, and programs involved in the process of supplying qualified and skilled labor for the country. This is important, Mr. Speaker, because too often there's a total detachment of the type of training we want to provide versus the training that is actually needed. And so even before we decided exactly how we would go about setting up the agency, we had widespread consultation with workers representatives, with employers and employers representatives, so that once we put together the agency and the training requirements, the curriculum, we wanted to make sure that it was responsive to our needs in the country today and moving forward. We didn't want to put something in place today that was only relevant maybe 100 years ago, 50 years ago. And I think too often we do that. The agency training system is designed to develop and improve employable skills and competencies, to transform undesirable attitudes and behaviors towards work, Mr. Speaker. Big issue we have. To transform undesirable attitudes and behavior towards work. Mr. Speaker, that's important because I can tell you, people come to you every day wanting to be hired, and they talk about how they could work any time. They could work anywhere you assign them, whatever job you assign them to do. And that's all well and good until after about a month on the job. Then they can't do this, they can't do that. They can't be sent to this location. Car tire flat. I can't take the bus anymore, you know? And so, Mr. Speaker, the idea is to really transform those types of thinking, right? Where you cause persons to appreciate more what it takes for them not only to get a job, but to keep a job. You know, and as I said before, that more than 60% of individuals who lose their jobs lose it because of attitudes, Mr. Speaker. You know, somebody told me the other day of somebody they hired, they had the choice to hire two companies, and one was substantially more than the other one. And so when they looked at the reputation of the one that cost more, they said, listen here, I'm in my nice house, I'm going to hire this company who I know will keep the surrounding clean. Once they finish the end of the day, it wouldn't be garbage all over the place. So let me pay a couple of extra dollars because I know the kind of quality work I'll be getting around my nice house. Of course, after the first day, Mr. Speaker, the workers left all of the wood thrown all over the place, garbage all in, and this is a nice finished home. You know, and when it was raised to the workers, they didn't see the big deal. You know, we only left a couple of things, you know, we can pick it up tomorrow. You know, but the point is, the only thing that separates us from any other country, Mr. Speaker, is the type of service that we provide. I don't think there are many things you could find here in the Bahamas that you couldn't find basically in some other country in the world. You know, and I told the story the other day when I went to Germany, and you could feel good customer service. Now, I know some persons would have had bad experiences everywhere they went, but this happens to this one particular place I went. You felt the service, and you felt welcome, and you didn't mind spending your money because of the type of service that you were being given. And so for most cases, Mr. Speaker, you know, the thing is, the attitude of the workers is that, man, listen here, I could provide a service bad today on this job because I just have to go tomorrow and find another job. You know, and so what we're trying to do is to change that type of attitude where we can make them functional properly and be able to guarantee the kind of competence that they need in order to get and to keep jobs, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government and establishing national training agency recognizes the importance of the agency being stakeholder-driven. You know, I remember when we were first establishing the urban renewal, and you looked at other programs that they had in the inner city and other parts in the outskirts as well, where persons would go and they would provide assistance and cleanup. The next day, the stuff would be right back there again. You know, and then with urban renewal, we decided, listen now, we have to keep the stakeholders involved in the entire process. And so the residents, the people who live in the community, the churches, the civil organizations, those who are part of the community, you made them a part of the process, and you saw the difference, rather than it being driven by the government. So when the government is out of office and stakeholders have no interest, of course the program goes along with them. But once you put programs, that's why even in Golden Gates, Mr. Speaker, I tell them in Golden Gates, listen here, I don't want to be spearheading anything in Golden Gates. I want the residents, I will give you all the support you need. I want the residents to spearhead it. So even when I'm no longer a member, these programs continue. But too often we like to put the government out in the front, we want to put individuals out in the front, and when those individuals are no longer there, then the program goes along with them. And so that is why it is important, Mr. Speaker, in the case of the National Training Agency, we included all of the stakeholders to make sure that they have a stake and they understand that they have a stake in what we are trying to accomplish. And we had them to understand, listen, we cannot do it without you. And so it was important for us to facilitate the cooperation between employees and employers, organizations, business communities, training institutions and programs and trainees. And of course, what would this program be without including urban renewal? I think the thing is, when you look at the urban renewal centers out there, they understand the dynamics of what's happening in all of these various communities. And so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have these community centers that are already. They're already involved in lots in the community. And so it's only up to us to tap into the resources that currently exist and allow us to see how we could help to enhance it or we could complement one another. The Speaker, the National Training Agency's functions will include providing leadership and structure for the development of industry-standardized, competency-based training, providing the organized framework for the delivery of industry-based competency training. It'll be facilitating workforce readiness and expanding the opportunity for increased job placement. The successful administration of the National Training Agency's functions will make possible the achievement of some critical national training objectives, which include increasing the capacity of individuals to participate in the workforce, promoting, identifying, and developing industry standards of occupations and training programs, providing a national certification framework, Mr. Speaker. That's important because, you know, when I look, for instance, at all of the workers that are imported into the Bahamas every year, and Mr. Speaker, I must say this as well, because I think it'll be ridiculous for anybody to think that the Bahamas could survive without foreign laborers, without foreign workers. Cannot happen. Cannot happen. We need foreign investment, and we need foreign laborers in certain instances, Mr. Speaker. When you look at the transfer of knowledge and transfer of skills, I mean, we have to admit that we don't operate at the highest possible standard. I don't think any country, but each country have some individuals who operate at the highest standards in certain industries. And so where we could use those individuals, bring them to the Bahamas, have the transfer of knowledge, transfer of skills, to better train and equip locals to take advantage of future opportunities, Mr. Speaker, then we should do so. You know, and where we can have Bahamians who are trained, just as other nationals are trained to go to other countries, Bahamians trained and certified to go to other countries, but you can't do it unless you have a program and a certification process that is not only recognized here in the Bahamas, but recognized globally, Mr. Speaker. And case in point is what happens in Grand Bahama. I mean, they bring in hundreds of individuals every year in the shipyard. who have certain qualifications and welding. Now, granted, today we have more qualified welders today than we had some years ago who went through a training program locally in Grand Bahama, but we don't have all of the qualified welders and the persons the technical persons that we need to work at the shipyard. And so we still have to continue to bring persons. Now, our goal is to see how we could make sure and we train as many Bahamians as possible to take advantage of these opportunities, Mr. Speaker. But the reality is sometimes it is seasonal. And so you may find that because of the good season here in the Bahamas, that you need X amount of welders, with, whether it's underwater welding or some other specialty welding here in the Bahamas, and 6 months from now, you may need those same trainers in Panama or Honduras. And so Bahamians have to not only be willing to be trained, but they have to be willing to get the exposure and the travel and to move away from home for short and long periods of time. You hear too often where persons, they don't want to leave home. As a matter of fact, not only do they don't want to leave the Bahamas, sometimes they don't want to leave Nassau to go work in one of the family islands. If you look at what's happening right now in Bimini, I spoke to somebody in Bimini last night. They said every possible building you could rent is occupied in Bimini right now. Everyone. Everybody in Bimini right now who want a job will perhaps be able to get a job. And so it will require individuals from other islands be willing to transfer to Bimini to work. But the question is, are they willing to go? I mean, when they had the Four Seasons in Exuma, you had a high turnover of employees because, granted, in some instances, employees wasn't comfortable with the arrangements. They thought it was going under one arrangement and ended up being another. I'm not speaking about a category. I'm speaking about a category of employees who say, man, I can't be away from Nassau any longer. I got to go back home. And so they take a job in Exuma, right? And then they decide after 2 or 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, I can't take Exuma, I got to go back to Nassau, right? Where you have some foreign nationals who they come from all the way in the Philippines, Portugal, all over the world. They come and they live here forever. They don't have a difficulty adjusting because they know that, listen, in order for me to survive, in order for me to move ahead in my life, I have to be able to be flexible, you know? And then, of course, you have the individuals who are willing to, when you look at the domestic workers, who are willing to be live-in. Well, the biggest problem we have is we have maybe thousands of jobs that we could give Bahamians for live-in housekeepers, live-in handymen, but they don't want to do it. And so we may be able to find a formula where we're able to take them through a training program that will cause them to appreciate that, listen here, I don't have to do this for the rest of my life, right? But I could, I mean, when you look, I look at some of those houses in Life, Mrs. Speaker, the workers' quarters, and they're better than my house. I'm talking about these houses, these $3-4 million homes, Mrs. Speaker. No, I'm telling you, they say, no, that's the workers' quarters right there, employees' quarters, you know? And so, but when I look at those, from what I see, Mr. Speaker, they value more than my house. These are quarters for the workers. They living like kings. Workers come and they tell you, listen here, not only are they paying me a half-decent wage, they're also sending their kids to school, right, Life Key School. So you have live-in housekeepers and live-in handymen living in Life Key, and their kids going to Life Key School because they're willing to leave their home 10,000 or 100,000 miles away, come and live in the Bahamas, and they're making $400 or $500 a week, all the meals paid for, no light bill, no water bill, no rent payment, and their kids are able to go to school. And so all I'm saying is there are many, many opportunities to speak for Bahamians. Many opportunities. We have to identify them, and then we have to address it. In healthcare, for instance, I'm told that all of the technicians, MRI technicians, CAT scan technicians, all those persons are foreigners. We've already asked, Mr. Speaker, for the public service to identify all those areas where they bring foreign workers in and see how we can either give in-service awards or give scholarships to individuals to be trained to take advantage of these opportunities. My father had a CAT scan one day, Mr. Speaker. It took him about 6 weeks to get the results. And that's because whoever the technician was wasn't available and he was busy, on vacation, all kinds of stuff. So 6 weeks to get a result of the CAT scan. When I believe you could get it, as soon as you finish, you can get it right away. When you go to the Cleveland Clinic and you take all your tests, right away you get it. Right? But now, so all I'm saying is the training agency will be looking at building capacity. And not only building capacity in those areas that are obvious to us, because we have some areas we don't know. At the Ministry of Works, for instance, Mr. Speaker, if we could get individuals with the right attitude, with the right complement to go to this training program, and eventually sometimes move on not only to the local training institutions, but they may decide after going to the training agency that, listen, I want to now go off to college. I want to become an engineer. We have about 10, 15 foreign engineers working at the Ministry of Works. We don't have sufficient engineers, Mr. Speaker, in the Bahamas. We have to go and bring engineers from Trinidad and Jamaica and all over the place. You see, and so if the agency could be used as a platform to really change the mindset and to frame the thinking of some of these individuals, because some people, it is not that they don't have it in them, you know. And I believe many times what separates us from success is opportunity. You may look at an individual and say, man, you stereotype them. They can't do this, they can't do that. And then you give them an opportunity, and then you are shocked as to what they could accomplish. But just by looking at the individual, you stereotype them, you decide what their limits are, and then you decide to give them a chance, and you realize that, boy, listen here, this is limitless what this person could accomplish. You know? And so the agency will be there to assess these individuals and refer them. And in some instances, I'm sure they will have scholarships available. They may have high flyers, somebody who went to the system, disadvantaged, single mother, no parents, didn't have an opportunity to go to college. They come to the agency recognized some potential in them. So listen, not only are we going to refer you locally, we will refer you internationally and give you an opportunity to accomplish much more than you ever dreamt you could accomplish. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about the potential of this agency, it is limitless. And when we look at all that the Bahamas have to offer, we're not saying, I have to say this often, we're not saying we don't want foreign workers. All we're saying is we are not preparing the Bahamas for them. We're preparing the Bahamas for Bahamians. Now, there may be instances when we have to bring in the foreign laborers. That's fine. I met with a group of persons from the financial services industry the other day, and I told them, listen here, I understand if you got a $500 million institution, and you say, listen here, man, I understand you're a qualified accountant, but I am investing this $500 million. I want my CFO and my CEO to be somebody who I want. I don't want somebody from the Bahamas. This is my $500 million, and these two positions, that's what I want. You call them owners' representatives. So we understand there will be instances, we can't fool ourselves. There will be instances when the owners say, I want my representative in this key position. And as a businessman, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, unlike many, I've been through the entire spectrum. I started off as a bus boy, was a bar boy, was a waiter, was a technician at the telco, doing underground cable. Then I went into transmission, went into supervising in the credit collection department, was the chairman of our pension plan, managing over $20 million in assets, was directing our medical plan. I'm an employer, I employ people, right? And so I've been through the entire spectrum. I have a full appreciation for every single angle of trade unionist, you know, and so all I'm saying is we understand the challenges that people face out there. But at the same time, we must do all that we could. And see, we shouldn't fool people in believing and listening. We will create 1,000 entrepreneurs. Listen, Mr. Speaker, that may be possible, right? But I can tell you, you will always have more workers than you have owners, always. And you will always have more persons who are not qualified to hold jobs, who you can train. They are trainable. But the opportunity simply does not exist. And so all I'm saying is, this agency will create an opportunity for every single individual in the Bahamas who up until now felt as though they does not have what it takes to enter into the workforce. And we will give them what they need and equip them to at least get them in the entry level. And in some instances, we will take them far beyond that, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, some of the objectives include increasing the number of persons pursuing technical and vocational education and training and the quality of training. It will be providing professional counseling and career guidance, Mr. Speaker. That's a big problem. You know, if you look at most of the successful athletes in the world, world-class athletes, they have personal psychologists and people who personally counsel them. You know why? Because sometimes our mental condition is the one thing that separates us from achieving everything we want to achieve at our maximum potential. And so we have professional counseling, we have career guidance. Sometimes people make wrong choices, right? Because they didn't have anybody to guide them. You know, you have, it's simple, I mean, we could look at it in a very simplistic way. When you go off to university, the first thing they do is they send you to somebody who would advise you on which areas of you should perhaps look at pursuing. And then when you decide what you want to pursue, they will advise you on which courses you should do first. Because you take the wrong courses first, it could end up discouraging you where you would really have the potential to do more, but the fact that you selected the wrong courses first, it discouraged you and made you feel as though the degree is so difficult until I can't do it. When in fact, it was simply because you chose to take the wrong courses first. and so it's going to be very important. It's going to be providing a central registration unit, providing referral and placement services. So after they go through all of the training, the assessment and the training, then they will provide the individuals with placement and referral. And so we will be connected to a number of large employers who will let us know up front, listen, these are these are specifics of individuals we're looking for. We intend to bring on these types of, fill these posts within this given period of time. And so if you could provide me with 10 persons next year with these qualifications, we are willing to accept them. And so the agency then, and that's only on a small scale. On a large scale, there are many employers telling them what their needs are. And so we will from time to time have to look at how we could amend what it is we're doing to make sure that we always remain relevant to what's happening in the workplace. We will be providing competency-based statistical data and information to government and relevant agencies, Mr. Speaker. That is so important. Research and development is perhaps one of the areas that receive most resources in most companies all over the world. And I can tell you, I said it before, when I travel as a trade unionist, then you hear Barbados talk about their statistics and their information, and they ask you about the Bahamas, you start saying what you think and what you feel, and you have no statistical information that will guide you in making your decisions. And so in this particular case, we will make sure that we keep proper statistical data and information, and we will share them with all of the relevant government agencies so that when we make decisions, it will be based on statistical information and not based on how we feel or what we hear. We talk to one person who influences our life, and everything they tell us, we take it as gospel. When you check the reality of what's actually happening on the ground, it's something totally different, Mr. Speaker. We will be developing a tracking and a monitoring system, Mr. Speaker. That's important, because from the time persons apply to us to be a part of the training agency, straight through their training, straight through when they are placed on a job, whether they're able to maintain the job, whether they had to be, how much they had to be retrained, how many jobs they got after going through agency. All of the information, Mr. Speaker, it will be good for us to monitor and track so that we will know how to modify the systems that we put in place. Of course, we will be promoting and encouraging national awareness. Mr. Speaker, National Training Agency will be the catalyst that provides uniformity, standardization, accreditation, assessment, and certification in the delivery of competency-based training, and a view of promoting and ensuring individual and workforce excellence. And this will be attained by focusing exclusively on behavioral, attitudinal, and modular competency-based training within the established framework of industry competency standards, and by supervising the facilitation of program articulation, certification, and validation, Mr. Speaker. But I think the most important thing would be the behavioral and attitudinal, Mr. Speaker, because I can tell you the behavior and attitudes of a lot of workers cost them their jobs on a regular basis, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, timing is important. So National Training Agency could not have come at a more fitting time in the economic growth and development of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, recently we've heard, and I spoke about it before and read about concerns from various sectors of our economy regarding the perceived challenges that employers will face in the near future, because it is believed that they will not be able to find the Bahamians who are educated enough and skilled enough to fill jobs, even service jobs, that will come on stream, beginning in Bimini next month, in Grand Bahama at the end of 2013, and New Providence at the end of 2014, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, when you hear about these things, you know that it cannot be true. And based on our research, we have the trainable individuals in the Bahamas now. There's no need for anybody to try to promote, Mr. Speaker, that we need to import unskilled or semi-skilled work in the Bahamas. No need at all. And even though the agency will be playing a significant role in ensuring that continue to be the case where we have these individuals, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you right now, when we look at our skills data bank and the individuals who are registered, we have lots of individuals registered now in the skills data bank, and I think many persons may not know about it. And so I would encourage individuals to go online. We have a skills data bank where persons could go online from anywhere in the world, register their skills. We have persons, whenever they hear about these huge developments like Bahama and the one coming on in Grand Bahama and Bimini, they actually living in the UK and all over the world, and they would register their skills and send those in and say, I'm interested in coming back home. I'm interested in a position at one of these new developments. And of course, we have employers as well who register their vacancies on the skills data bank. and it's www.bahamas.gov.bs/labor, and you can go there and actually register. What we've done also, Mr. Speaker, is we've also met with Atlantis over the past several weeks, and where individuals had to actually go to Atlantis site to look at all of the possible vacancies there, we have now worked out a protocol where all of the vacancies will be uploaded to the Department of Labor website simultaneously as it is uploaded on Atlantis website. And so for individuals who think they have to go to Atlantis website, sometimes they don't know about Atlantis website. You just know that there's a website of the Department of Labor, and the good thing now is once the information is uploaded on Atlantis, they're working on a protocol where it'll be automatically uploaded to the labor website as well. And so we're trying to see if we can meet with more employers who will do the same thing. Because in many instances, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you individuals simply don't know that they have access to these things. They don't know that they exist. But I can tell you everything starts with labor. Everything starts with labor. When somebody is looking for somebody to be hired, they check with labor. If they're looking to post a vacancy, if they're looking to be hired, they start with labor, Mr. Speaker. In cases, Mr. Speaker, where persons want a work permit, before you can apply for a work permit, you have to apply for a labor certificate. And so that is why I want individuals to know that it's extremely important. Whether you are unskilled, semi-skilled, or highly paid professional, right, and looking for work, please register with the Department of Labor. The first thing we do when somebody applies for a labor certificate is we check our database to see if we have any individuals in the country looking for work of that type. And then, of course, we have them to advertise and all that stuff. We're trying to see if we could do a better public relations exercise, where we advertise more on the community channels and every single media that's available to us, because a lot of times some people don't have internet access. And so even though the database is good, the fact is you got many households without internet access. And so that is why we are trying to see if we could use every possible opportunity to advertise in every type of media possible, so that persons are well aware of what exists, or those vacancies that exist in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. And of course, we are looking at, we said before, about 400 to 600 persons being taken in the agency initially when it is first up and running. And after we get up and running and we are through with our pilot programs in those 4 core areas, we'll begin to gradually expand them to all industries. And eventually we're looking at having a capacity to train between 2,000 and 2,500 individuals every year. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned before about sitting guilds. And so I think there are persons who don't have a full appreciation of what sitting guilds represent. And the fact that we were able to, or we've already approached sitting guilds, they've already agreed to work in partnership with us. It is significant because they're one of the leading vocational education providers globally, Mr. Speaker, one of the leading vocational and education providers, not in the region, but globally. And they have over 2 million learners and working towards over 500 qualifications, Mr. Speaker. And of course, they have over 10,000 centers. And they are in over 80 countries. And so we are talking about an institution that's globally recognized. And so once you get your certificate, and they see city and guilds, wherever you go in the world, Mr. Speaker, it's not like when you got a certificate and they see Nassau, Bahamas. And they say, Nassau what? So you mean that's where the space shuttle go up? No. Or Nassau in New York, or Nassau in New Jersey. No, this is Nassau, Bahamas. You got to go to, when they see city and guilds, Mr. Speaker, everybody knows right away that this is an accredited institution, and the paper is worth more than what you see the ink is worth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, city and guilds have supported the capacity building of national training agencies in a number of jurisdictions, including Jamaica and the Bahamas. And of course, they work in partnership right now with the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology. And we welcome their expertise and expertise in their knowledge. We welcome their knowledge and expertise in assisting the Bahamas workforce in becoming globally competitive via the avenue of certification that is globally recognized and accepted, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate first of all, the Prime Minister for his vision in seeing the necessity to establish this national training agency. He is not building capacity for himself. He is building capacity for the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. And then I want to congratulate Ms. Agata Marcel, who works tirelessly, Mr. Speaker. You know, sometimes people talk to you and you can't feel nothing. You hear them, you see the mouth move, you hear the sound coming out, but you can't feel it. But when you hear her speak about training, you not only see the passion, you could feel it. You know, and so you don't have to be physically talking to her at this age right now in life where she could be relaxing. She don't need all this headache. But she was shut out of this process over the last 5 years. And she has the desire, she has the will. She just listen, she got a burning commitment within herself to see as many Bahamians as possible trained to be efficient. You remember what something they called the 100-day challenge that was so successful, I think it was back in the 90s? That was something that's actually partly spearheaded by her. She was one of those who was the initiator of that entire 100-day challenge, which was extremely successful. Now today, she's playing a significant role in helping us to establish the National Training Agency. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that any Bahamian, thank God for the PLP, Mr. Speaker. I believe that any and all Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, even those persons, Mr. Speaker, who may not support us politically, right? Even those side opposite, who will try to see how they could punch it. And guess what? I don't blame you. When I was on that side, you know, I did what I had to do. You know, but I was more responsible. You know, I was more responsible, but I did what I had to do, Mr. Speaker. So, you know, we understand and we welcome the criticism. Because at the end of the day, you know, I always tell people that sometimes, Mr. Speaker, in Golden Gates, when I go looking for those persons who I know will criticize me, because I hate being around people who talking good with me all the time. No, give me those ones who criticize me, who help me to focus more and understand and listen to man, life is not a bed of roses. So we appreciate the opposition. That's their job. You know, we would ask them to be a bit more responsible, and we would ask them to see how they can stay away from the hypocrisy as much as possible. Because you can't say A today and then tomorrow you go and pretend as though you never said A yesterday. You know, and sometimes the same day, and then sometimes when you repeat what they say, they get upset. But all I do is repeat what they say. I don't add anything. But when they hear from somebody what they say, they realize how it sounds. You know. And so I expect they will do it, but I also, Mr. Speaker, want to foreshadow that there are one or two amendments that we are looking at as well. Not significant, very insignificant. When you look at under the officers and employees of the board, where it speaks to the board, we just need to change in 1, 2, 3, and 4 instances. We need to change it to agency. And of course, there's one other area, Mr. Speaker, that speaks to under transfer of assets, where to say the treasurer for on behalf of any such agency we want to stop there and we will be taking out the of institution. And so there are one or two minor amendments, not significant, insignificant, but I think it's important for us to make those changes. And so, Mr. Speaker, with that, I so move. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Do we have a seconder? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for South Beach.
Mr. Speaker, as I rise, as always, I would like to acknowledge the Almighty God, for I am admonished in all my ways to acknowledge Him, and He shall direct my path. Mr. Speaker, I am always grateful to the wonderful people of South Beach who give me the opportunity to represent them in this honorable place. But Mr. Speaker, today I stand on behalf of the young people of South Beach, and as a matter of fact, on behalf of the young people all over this country. For very rarely their voices are heard. Mr. Speaker, I stand here today as a representative who walked the streets of South Beach 2 years prior to the election, for 2 years, in the act interacted with the young people, heard their concerns, held their hearts, hugged them, and tried to reassure them that things would be better. Mr. Speaker, I stand here today as a mother of 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, who according to international standards are young people, young men, young women, who has no reservations in letting me know how they believe this nation and nations around the world are neglecting their young. Mr. Speaker, they talk about how opportunities to become owners and possessors of license in their chosen career is so difficult to obtain because their profession is monopolized by a small group of older persons who keep the door closed to prevent our young, intelligent men and women who seem to be a threat to them from excelling in their profession and maximizing their potential. Mr. Speaker, they see and they understand that in this society, if you are not in the clique, and if nobody knows your name, the chances for upward mobility is like a fool's gold. Mr. Speaker, I stand as a woman who sees how the lack of education and the high level of unemployment are stripping our men of their dignity. Mr. Speaker, God placed in every man an innate sense to be providers and sustainer of their families. And if that is taken away from them, then they find alternate ways to compensate for and or fulfill this intrinsic need that is placed in them. Mr. Speaker, I like to make reference to Sir Lyndon Oscar Pinland because, Mr. Speaker, I believe he was a prophet because some of the things that he said from 1967, 73, 78, we are faced with them today. Mr. Speaker, he said, and I quote, "Our own policy then must be based on the awareness of the role of the youth as an important, if not a dominant factor for ushering social change. And programs and activities involving young people will have to be based on recognizing youth's contribution to development. Young people can and should be seen as a powerful agent for national development and social change. And as agents of social change, they are our most valued national assets." Mr. Speaker, he went on to say, "The frustration they feel are real. The problems they have are real. The solution then must be real and viable. But the problems are ours too. They are the problems of all Bahamians. There is no room for partisanship, and none should seek to gain any mileage or unduly criticize efforts. For we all owe it to our young people to secure their future. We must all lend a helping hand. The problems are too grave for us to let them go unnoticed. Efforts are national efforts, irrespective of our political persuasion, social status, or cultural barriers. We all have to build the future of our country for our young people with our own hands." End quote. Mr. Speaker, In a charter for governance presented to the people in April 2012, the PLP, who was then opposition, realized that in order to secure the future of our beloved nation for our young people, and in order to restore the middle class, which the FNM fought so hard to eliminate over the years, we had to create a more responsive and relevant education system, which included doubling invested time, effort, capital, and human resource in the education of its people to ensure that the maximum potential of education in this country is realized. This now government realized that it cannot be business as usual and confirm on its behalf that education is the key to empowerment. Yeah. Therefore, our educational system must afford our young men and women every opportunity to identify and prepare for a career choice best suited to their interests and strength, which will allow them to be self-sufficient, contributing members of society. As the member for Centerville said, we know we have to get involved in the retraining of our people. Mr. Speaker, on September 28, 2012, the Prime Minister and member for Centerville announced that the government will launch a national training agency aimed at creating a certified workforce. Mr. Speaker, a certified workforce based on established and approved industry standards. Mr. Speaker, not just a program where at its completion, like the 52-week program, one can only say, I used to work in a mechanic shop, or I used to work at the hotel, but rather, I am a mechanic. I am a clerk. I am an accountant. Mr. Speaker, because this program will be certified, individual will meet national and international standards, and they can seek gainful employment in the career of their certification. Mr. Speaker, while the 2012 labor force survey, which was conducted in May, revealed that unemployment among young people ages 15 to 24 declined by 4.6% over that past 6 months, and that unemployment had dropped from 15.9 to 14.7 throughout the country. I am sure we all in here can agree that much work needs to be done. Hence, Mr. Speaker, the announcement of the National Training Program, which was so ably explained in this honorable place by the Minister of Labor and National Insurance, which of course this country so desperately needs. Mr. Speaker, I wish to commend also the consultant director who has worked tirelessly to bring the National Training Agency to fruition. Mr. Speaker, on September 14, 2009, the then Minister of Labor and Social Development and the FNM government introduced a national training program to the Bahamian people. She said at the launching of the program, it will help displaced workers to learn new trades such as masonry, basic carpentry, landscaping, heavy equipment operation, accounting, diesel mechanic, nail artistry and design, facial care and technology, computer application, straw and shellcraft. The International Labour Organization and countries throughout the region were monitoring the national training program to see if it should become a model for countries who hope to combine social with labor. But at the end of the program, they had nothing to show except for $48 million when it was budgeted for $25 million because it was poorly structured. Mr. Speaker, I asked after 52 weeks, where are the certificates the participants received for their training, and what are the results of the ILO monitoring? Mr. Speaker, we have to be mindful not to make the same mistakes again. As the success of our youth, the success of our people and our country depends on the decision we make today. With the aggressive training initiatives of the College of the Bahamas Technical Vocational Institute, the National Training Agency, together with private sector interests, this training of our nation's workforce must move forward. We cannot afford to fail. I urge us to not just teach or train our young people to lay blocks, but also teach them how to read the plan, become site managers, teach them how to create business plans, and the understanding of assets and liability. Teach them the importance of alternative dispute resolution. Have analytical sessions and practical exercises like role-playing sessions for the development of negotiation and communication skills. It is equally important for them to learn the history of the Bahamas, to gain a sense of national pride and independence. Mr. Speaker, in this 40th year of independence, more so than ever, we need to instill in our young people the genesis and development of Bahamian history. Let them know that the freedom and civil liberties they are enjoying today came with a price. Teach them about the men and women such as Selindin, who I love to quote so much, Samilo, Doris Johnson, Henry Taylor, Cecil Wallace Whitfield, Randall Fox, Mary Ingram, and the members of the women's suffrage movement, and many others, Mr. Speaker. Let them know that it was their brain, their blood, their sweat, and their tears that have us, Mr. Speaker, have them, Mr. Speaker, in a country where democracy rules. Mr. Speaker, in the Charter of Governance, this government is explicit that its focus is not just short-term solution, but long-term, 2030 and beyond, where more Bahamians can become leaders, owners, partners, where Bahamian contractors do not have to be discriminated against in gated communities such as Life at Key. Although they possess equal skills and work ethics as other brothers and sisters of a different race. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that the four prominent industrial sectors identified by the National Training Agency to begin its training are absolutely relevant for this time. The hospitality and tourism sector, wholesale and retail sector, commercial clerical sector, and the basic auto mechanic sector, which will commence in Nassau, Grand Bahama, Abaco, and Exuma, with a targeted number of 700 for Nassau and 450 for the Family Islands. With the training exercise of Bahamians, with this training exercise, the excuse that Bahamians can't do it to import cheap labor will be eliminated, as Bahamians will be certified workers. Mr. Speaker, it is reassuring to know that these bold initiatives will be carried out in collaboration with all sectors to provide training service and to accommodate apprenticeship and internship skills, so that the training and skill provided are consistent with the market demand, thereby reducing the need to import labor. Mr. Speaker, this type of partnership I had observed has already been established by the Ministry of Grand Bahama and the private sector, but I see no involvement with the civil society. While the government of the Bahamas recognized the importance of the entity being stakeholders driven to facilitate cooperation between employers and employers' organizations, businesses, communities, and training institutions, Urban Renewal 2.0, and the government, we must bear in mind as workers' representatives, such as trade unions, may play a pivotal role to ensure social dialogue and strengthening our social and safety network for workers. In his report towards the ILO centenary realities, renewal, and tripartite commitment, the Director General of ILO in paragraph 38 states, and I quote, "Employers and trade unions must increasingly take more responsibility for investing in skills and aligning their efforts with those of public policies and training providers. In an era of accelerated technological and organizational change, strengthening of education and training system and the provision of basic skill to all have to be not just top priority, but a shared one, with ILO acting in full support of its tripartite constituents," end quote. Mr. Speaker, the government of the Bahamas, led by the Right Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie, got it right. So when I read the nonsense of those whose minute mind cannot see beyond their myopic thought process, who believe, and I quote, that this will never work, who believe, as they put it, that our children from their late teens through their 20s are a lost generation, while other countries such as Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad are investing millions in their young people. Mr. Speaker, I will have the naysayers to know that this PLP government have never and will never give up on our youth. We will never give up on our citizens, and yes, Mr. Speaker, we will never give up on our country. Mr. Speaker, this little archipelago is all that we have. And if we do not preserve it for our young, pray tell, who will? Mr. Speaker, South Beach, especially our young people, support and second the National Training Agency bill and is eagerly awaiting its implementation. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to establish the National Training Agency. to develop a competency-based training and job placement system and for connected purposes. As many. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Long Island.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, once again, it is my distinct pleasure and privilege to be able to stand this morning in this honorable House to represent the wonderful people of Long Island who are always able to tune in and hear me speak on their behalf and revert to me by telling me how encouraged they are. So, Mr. Speaker, whenever I speak here, I speak on their behalf and for Bahamians from a broad cross-section, as do most of us here in this place. Mr. Speaker, just before I get into this morning, I just want to send my heartfelt condolences to the family of young Carlton Cartwright, who died tragically by asthma earlier in the week, Sunday to be exact. 11-year-old, you would recall he's on the front of the Tribune this morning, just graduated from Morrisville Primary School, and he was at the flag raising ceremony for the 40th anniversary of independence celebrations. And it's such a loss to our community of South Long Island, because he was certainly one of those stellar students that we were looking for great and exciting things from, wonderful potential. He received quite a few awards at graduation. His parents are deeply saddened, and the entire community of Morrisville and South Long Island are saddened today. I'll speak a little bit more about him as I get into my contribution. But today, Mr. Speaker, I stand here on behalf of the side opposite, along with my colleagues, to speak to this bill that has been presented, entitled the National Training Agency Bill of 2013. And Mr. Speaker, I sat very patiently as members opposite would have tried to tempt me into things that I'm glad you protected me, sir. But Mr. Speaker, relevance is the issue today. The relevance to the training of our Bahamian people, the relevance as it relates to getting Bahamians back to work. And you know, Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, I'd just like to give a little historical overview of what happened during the period 2007 to 2012 under the administration of the F&M. Mr. Speaker, it was early in our administration, 2008, when we first realized the impact of what was happening worldwide around our globe. When the recession of 2008 began, and the impact immediately felt within the borders of the Bahamas. And you will note, Mr. Speaker, that in our 2008 budget, one of the things that we immediately did as a government was to ensure that we had the safety net mechanisms in place to try and protect families, women, men, children, to ensure that they could continue to be housed, continue to eat, continue to be clothed. And we significantly increased our budgetary allotments and allocations to the Ministry of Labor and Social Development to ensure that we were able to protect our people. So, Mr. Speaker, when we sit here sometimes and take the abuses of the side opposite, declaring our lack of vision, our lack of caring, our lack of preparation in protecting the Bahamian people, I'm sure that if you were to take it to the court of public opinion, I'm sure that the public will agree that we did much during our time to ensure that we protected the Bahamian workforce. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that it was in 2009, in collaboration, Mr. Speaker, with the industry partners, with the Chamber of Commerce partners, and I dare say, Mr. Speaker, members that sit on the side opposite today include the member for Pinewood, who was then president of the Chamber of Commerce, and also the elusive member for Marco City, whom we haven't seen in this place for some time, but he was certainly a part of the partnership in terms of ensuring that we work together with the private sector, with the labor sector, and with the agencies of government to produce a viable program that would help to mitigate the fallout from that huge recession that we took a hit from. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we were able to do at that time was to formulate a plan with the input of the members for Pinewood, and as I said, the elusive member for Marco City, and other industry partners, along with union partners, to create a mechanism which we referred to as the retooling and the retraining of our Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, the greatest hit that year was the hotel industry. We had massive layoffs because, as you would realize, disposable income to those who would visit our shores had diminished significantly. And so you saw women, you saw men, you saw young people who had held very good positions with sure income just being left with nothing to hold on to. And what we created, Mr. Speaker, truly was a model, much to the disagreement of what the member for South Beach has said. The ILO did, in fact, listen to what we did. The OAS, the World Bank, the IMF all had conferences where we shared what we were doing in the Bahamas. We shared it with Latin America, we shared it with the Caribbean, and yes, we shared it with the world. And it was hailed as one of the good practices that should have been emulated by other countries, and it was in fact emulated, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the same bureaucrats and technocrats that sit in the Ministry of Labor today can attest to the fact that what we did was a success. When we engaged individuals in the 52 work program, we did much of what is being proposed in this training agency today. And Mr. Speaker, we had great success with it because many of those individuals, unlike what the member for South Beach has said, who said they used to work, many of them are engaged today on a full-time basis. In those places. Mr. Speaker, they will revile us and talk about the fact that, yes, we spent $48 million on this. And Mr. Speaker, despite the fact that it was $23 million over budget, we know that this was money well spent because this went into the pockets of Bahamians. This made people allowed to have food on their table, to have a roof over their head, and to have clothes, and to make sure their children could go to school. So, Mr. Speaker, that was money spent for the Bahamian people. And we will do it again, Mr. Speaker, if we had to do it. So we don't take any problems with the fact that they think that it was a waste of time and a waste of energy. But, Mr. Speaker, as I speak here today on this National Training Agency bill, I want to bring to your attention, Mr. Speaker, two very important pieces of legislation that exist today. It's Chapter 320 of our statute laws. It's called the Apprenticeship Act, okay? And, Mr. Speaker, if one were to go through this act, if one who comes here to legislate would familiarize themselves with the existing laws that we have on our books today, you will realize that this National Training Agency is nothing more than a duplication of what already exists. And the fact of the matter is, you look at the BTVI bill of 2010, and I want to speak to it, Mr. Speaker. Look at Clause 5 of the BTVI Technical and Vocational Bill of 2010, which the governing side participated in when we passed this legislation. Clause 5 of that bill, just passed over 2 years ago, says, this bill makes provision for the functions of the Institute, which includes technical, educational, and vocational training for for students in core areas relevant to the Bahamian economy. The conferment of diplomas, certificates, and other awards, consultation, and collaboration with employers, trade, commercial confederations, and other societal stakeholders in determining courses of instruction and instructional methodologies. Mr. Speaker, we have at the helm of this outstanding institute a Bahamian woman by the name of Dr. Dow, an academician headed with her team, who are in the process from 2010 of bringing the accreditation to all of these various institutions and all of these different training programs already. It is under the Ministry of Education. Mr. Speaker, why are we as Bahamians reinventing the wheel? We are not opposing for opposing's sake, because we want Bahamians to be equipped. We want our Bahamians to be engaged. We want our Bahamians to be trained for the 21st century and for the jobs that will arise in the Bahamian economy. And so, Mr. Speaker, I also want to bring to your attention the apprenticeship bill, which is a bill that has not been repealed. It is on our books. It speaks to all of the things you heard the member for Golden Gate speak to, that is now being brought because they created a new name, a new agency called the National Training Agency, so that they can break down and open rental accommodations on Bradston Road, in the Darville building, another Darville building. I'd like to know the connection there, friends, family, and lovers, you know, but in any event, Mr. Speaker, they're moving expeditiously to have groundbreaking of this, and I understand it's now moved back because they're going to Bimini to open. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, the money that we are expending, I suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, and I suggest to the Bahamian people, the money being expended in this exercise, and I have no difficulty with the head of the agency. I know her to be a very competent Bahamian. She sits here in the gallery today. My issue is not with her. My issue is not with the individuals they intend to put in this and populate this. My issue is with the fact that we have the legislative framework, we have the institutional framework, we have the mechanisms already in place to achieve all that is being put forward in this. And Mr. Speaker, I am no legal eagle, and so I'm going to leave some of the problems in the legal logistics of this document to those legal eagles. And I know that there are a lot more, because, you know, on that side, there's nothing but brilliance reposed over there. But yet, on this side, we mere mortals can come here to show you the problems we have with the legal work in this particular document. So the mere mortals will show to them the problems that this legally creates for the business community, Mr. Speaker. But like I said, I will leave that to my able legal eagle, who sits to my left, the Honorable Member for Montague. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about this training agency, we are creating another level of bureaucracy that is unnecessary in this environment, when we're talking about cutting back on the recurrent expenditure of government because of the challenges we have in creating a higher deficit, when we can in fact incorporate the players and all of what we have in these two pieces of legislation which currently exist, the Apprenticeship Board and the BTVI Board of 2010. And so, Mr. Speaker, I tell you, we on this side cannot, for the life of us, determine what is the necessity in creating this new bureaucracy called a National Training Institute. I think also the person who they're going to have head this agency would at some point
Member for Long Island, the member for Marathon stands. Member for Long Island, member for Marathon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to correct the member when she said the BTVI Board of 2010.
Members, honorable members.
Yeah. Yeah, I said I just wanted to correct the member when she stated the BTVI board of 2010. The fact of the matter is the act was passed in 2010 by the former administration, but up to when they left office, a year and a half after the act was brought into force, they had not appointed a board to carry out the mandate of the act. And so there was no board appointed in 2010. As a matter of fact, the board was just recently appointed under my administration, under my ministry, in order to carry out the mandates of the BTVI Act. And so those provisions are just now beginning to take force, because prior to now, no board was appointed to bring that into force. So I just want to make that correction.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Long Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That even substantiates my position even more strongly, because the fact of the matter is the Minister for Education has now reaffirmed what I've been saying. The fact is Dr. Dahl is the head of BTVI, a very competent, as I said, academician who certainly knows what it is to take that particular institute to the level that we need to have it at. And I cannot see how in this environment we are going to have the outside persons that the minister would have spoken to for accreditation to come into the Bahamas to give the accreditation, which the BTVI Institute is already acceding on our behalf. And so, now, you know, Mr. Speaker, I sat and listened to the side opposite. I could have had points of order as well, you know. I don't know that I have to yield to this constant interruption.
It's not a constant interruption, Member for Long Island. It's not a constant interruption. The member yields. The chair recognizes the member for Marathon.
Mr. Speaker, again, I just wanted to point out to the member, the honorable member, because I don't want her to give, for the public to get the wrong impression. She also has to realize that persons at BTVI are listening. And the same city and guilds that the member spoke about, the BTVI has arrangements with them with certain courses that they offer. What is going on now is an expansion of a training institute, which is going to offer hundreds and hundreds of opportunities for Bahamians. It's a multifaceted approach, it's a multi-agency approach, and it's being led to a great part by the Ministry of Labor. And so I don't want her to give the impression that all of a sudden this foreign group is coming in. This group has been here for years and will continue to be here. We are now just expanding it greatly, and having it under a institute that primarily focuses directly on that. BTVI's function is different. It's a different, totally, Mr. Speaker. And if the member opposite doesn't understand that, well, she doesn't get what we are talking about, Mr. Speaker.
Well, thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Long Island.
Thank you. You know, Mr. Speaker, every time he rises, I think he reinforces exactly what it is I'm saying. So I thank him very much for that intervention, because the reality is, you know, the accreditation process has already been accepted, and they're using the very same one. So what we're doing, Mr. Speaker, is duplicitous. They're creating another arm to duplicate what already exists. And so, you know, it makes absolutely no sense. They are spending money. The government is expending money once more on something that already exists. They're spending the Bahamian people's money, you understand. And so I thank him very, very much for reinforcing what it is I am saying. You know, Mr. Speaker, this is a wonderful place to be in, because everybody, like I said, on the other side thinks that, you know, brilliance is only reposed in their minds. And the reality of the matter is, you know, God has blessed all of us with the ability. I speak, Mr. Speaker, not as a lawyer. I speak as a business person. I also speak as an individual who, over many years, having excelled in my field of endeavor, of funeral service, many people would be aware, throughout the length and breadth of this Bahamas, the amount of men and young women that these hands, this brain, has trained, men and women, who, yes, they don't have accreditation, Mr. Speaker, but they're working in funeral homes around this country, taking care of loved ones of people here and abroad and everywhere, that I would have trained and paid them while they were learning as apprentices. And they're making good money today. The point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is this whole apprenticeship that we are now talking about today is something that has been practiced throughout the Bahamas and the world for years. You want to talk about craftsmanship and training? Mr. Speaker, we have today some of the best craft store persons in the Bahamas. Just on Facebook last week, a young lady by the name of Keisha has produced shoes that look like Ferragamos. Amazing, amazing shoes. Beautiful. Mr. Speaker, we don't have to go far and wide. She learned her craft at the feet of her parents, her grandparents, her aunts, her uncles. BTVI can go all the way into the Family Islands, as they have been doing, to find these craftspersons so that we can train people in these crafts. It's about getting people to work, Mr. Speaker. Yes, it is about getting people to create things that are unique and get it to tie in with all that we're talking about in Bahamianization in this 40th year. We had a wonderful opportunity yesterday to do a tour of Bahamas. I was so encouraged to hear that they are going to be going to Family Islands to be able to find these indigenous crafts. The baskets of red baize, Mr. Speaker, the shipbuilding of Long Island and other islands, the straw work of our people, the salt industry that people are now mixing in with pepper and making body scrubs, things like this that they can use in the hotels, Mr. Speaker. These are the things that are getting people to work. We need to just be able to make sure that our people have the ability to get the collateral to become self-employed, not just employed, not just employees. And one of the things we did in our training program, Mr. Speaker, was the fact that at the end of that 52-week program, we had people like this producing jewelry. This jewelry here today, Mr. Speaker, like this button for the 40th independence. This jewelry, Mr. Speaker, is for the 40th independence. Earrings of the Bahamian flag. Rings with the Bahamian colors. You know, Mr. Speaker, entrepreneurs, their own business. I want to send it out. Aisha Forbes, she made these. I have a cousin who lives in Florida who made the most dynamic cufflinks for men with the Bahamian flag. They're all online. This is what we talk about, getting Bahamians back to work and creating ownership society and empowerment society. It's not, Mr. Speaker, about just training people to go and work at Bahamas or to go and work at Bimini Bay. It's about creating the environment, Mr. Speaker, for people to be all that they can be, whether they want to work at a Bahama or whether they want Bahama to source the things that they produce. That is what this is about. You want to talk about training, Mr. Speaker? I heard the side opposite during the budget talk about, oh, we're going to put greenhouses at the prison, we're going to put greenhouses at Simpson Pen, we're going to do this. Mr. Speaker, been there, did it, we did it. I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, during my tenure, the gentleman who sits, the Abaco, can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that we put greenhouses at the Simpson Pen School. They produced vegetables, bananas, pigs, and chickens. And when I went, the kids told me, yes, we enjoyed what we ate. But it was the sustainability, Mr. Speaker. It was the lack of sustainability. You know, and Mr. Speaker, the reality is they can say no all they want. But we actually did that. And so there's nothing new that they're doing. There's nothing new under the sun. As a young person, they always grew their own vegetables at the prison. When they stopped, I have no idea. But they grew vegetables and they grew livestock as well. So this isn't any new undertaking, Mr. Speaker. But the key is, while our children and our men and our women are in the care of the government, wards of the state, or at Her Majesty's prison, they too are being trained. They too, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we must not forget our disabled society. You want to talk about training? One of the best receptionists in the public service, Mr. Speaker, works in the office of the Attorney General. She's a blind young woman. Every day on time, every day at her post. Very courteous. You want to talk about training? Go right across the street here. There's a cigar manufacturing company that employs 2 disabled people. One cannot talk and one cannot hear. Related to the member for Killarney. They produce some of the best cigars in the Bahamas. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? Their production level is absolutely amazing. You want to talk about training? I think about Ms. Davis, who many years ago ran Hopedale Center. And she trained my cousin, who could not talk. He was a mute. Trained him how to read, write, and do all manner of craft. Mr. Speaker, we don't need to reinvent the Training Institute. All we need to do is use the mechanisms we have in place, do the public-private partnerships, and let us make alliances with those individuals so that we can move this Bahamas forward. We don't need to spend more money renting new premises. We need to take the money they're hoping to spend and put it into the existing institutions that we have. We had the building community, the construction community, as a part of the apprenticeship board. We had all of the individuals in the car dealerships and car repairs involved. As I said, we had the member for Pinewood involved. He was then the president of the Chamber of Commerce. We had the elusive member for Marco City involved. He was the president for Grand Bahama. We had partners from all across the Bahamas involved in this training program that we carried out, Mr. Speaker. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? That is all they need to do. That is all they need to do. They need to continue that rather than trying to create and rewrite history. They need to carry on. They talk about stop, cancel, and review. I suggest, Mr. Speaker, they need to stop, cancel, and review this piece of legislation and move on with what we have in place already. And I'm going to tell you why, Mr. Speaker. One of the things that bothers me most about this particular piece of legislation is in section, I think it's section 9. I just want to find that, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, if you look at the legislation for the apprenticeship, legislation, it has it right. But the writing in this particular national training bill is really confusing. It's about the powers of the inspectors, and that's at section 25. Mr. Speaker, I invite the government side, to look at this, because what we have determined from this is these inspectors, and I want them to take this seriously. These inspectors, as this law is written on this paper, gives wide range powers, Mr. Speaker, without any guidelines as to what exactly the inspectors should do. And it also carries a fine, Mr. Speaker, against businesses. What am I saying? An inspector, according to this bill that is being proposed, can enter the premises of any business where apprentices are being taught or being apprenticed without warrants or without anything, and without any guidelines as to what they're asking for. And once their requests have not been answered, they can be liable, the businesses that is, can be liable to an offense and a conviction fine of $2,000. That isn't building alliances with businesses, Mr. Speaker. That's a deterrent. That's a deterrent because, you know, if a business has no guidelines as to what to expect when an inspector comes to their premises, you think they're going to take on any apprentice? No way. Mr. Speaker, let me read to you what is in the apprenticeship legislation, which articulates it so clearly. That's why I can't understand why the brilliance on that side would bring such a poorly constructed piece of legislation to this place when we already have it written and all they have to do is follow. This is what Section 14 of the Apprenticeship Act says. Every employer who employs an apprentice shall keep in respect of each and such apprentice a record of the remuneration paid to and the time worked by such apprentice, together with such reports as may be made on the work of such apprentice. It goes on to say, if an inspector comes, that those records, those are the records that the inspector will look at, and those records can then, determine whether or not the apprentice is working within the parameters of what is suggested by the accrediting agencies, which in this instance is BTVI. So, Mr. Speaker, I would strongly recommend to the side opposite to look at this piece of legislation. It is well written. It serves the purpose for which they intend to create this new agency, and certainly it is clearly articulated so that the business community do not become victims or criminals by some person with a nondescript set of powers to just go into their place of work and demand things that has no parameters for which they're being guided by. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious piece of legislation that we have got to look at in that regard. And so I suggest, Mr. Speaker, as I stand here on behalf of Long Island, yes, bring BTVI to Long Island, bring apprenticeship to Long Island, take it to Exuma, take it to Grand Bahama, take it to Inagua, take it wherever. Because wherever Bahamians are, where we have women, where we have men, where we have children, we want them to be employed. But we do not want the government to go down this road of creating yet another bureaucracy to spend more money when that money can go into touching more lives. And Mr. Speaker, like I said, those are good people they're recommending to have in the agency. I have no difficulty with that. They're Bahamians. But let us deal with this in the way it should be done. They do not need to go and rent new premises. They do not need to spend more money creating and reinventing the wheel. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I take my seat, I admonish the government to seriously look at this legislation. Take this legislation and determine if this is in fact the right way forward. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Marathon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hadn't intended to speak during this debate. I thought it was a straightforward piece of legislation that we were bringing forward that would have the support of all members present. But I felt it necessary after listening to the member for Long Island just to clear up a few things, Mr. Speaker. The first thing, Mr. Speaker, is that you have to understand the difference between a training agency and a tertiary educational institution.
That's right.
That's the first point. PTVI is set up as a tertiary institution for higher learning, Mr. Speaker. It does have, as a component of it, some training courses, Mr. Speaker. But what we are here today, Mr. Speaker, is for the establishment of a training agency, a national training agency. Now, Mr. Speaker, I had the pleasure prior to the elections in March of last year to go to Trinidad. And while I was in Trinidad, Mr. Speaker, I met with persons who were involved in their National Training Institute and accreditation agency, Mr. Speaker. And I was blown away by how far the country had gone with regard to taking seriously the training of its people. So much so, Mr. Speaker, that they had it integrated into accreditation and also with regard to layers and tiers of professional development, so that within each sector of the economy, Mr. Speaker, each sector, this training agency and accreditation agency was responsible for laying out the qualifications for each person in that and what sort of salary they would expect once they reach certain qualifications, Mr. Speaker. It happens in Jamaica. It happens in Barbados, Mr. Speaker. We are way behind the 8 ball, Mr. Speaker. We are so far behind, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was so moved by it. When I came home, Mr. Speaker, from the airport, I didn't even go straight to my house. I went straight to the then leader of the opposition, the present Prime Minister's house, and sat down with him to explain to him, listen, this is what is going on around us. And he then articulated what his vision was with the training agency when he was Prime Minister last. And then we said, okay, when we come into government, the Prime Minister said, we are going to move full speed ahead with this. And that's where we are, Mr. Speaker. So said, so done, Mr. Speaker. So said, so done. And so I don't understand why there would be opposition to this, Mr. Speaker. This is a national imperative. It is critical to our national development to continue to improve the level of education and training of our people. We committed that we would double our investment.
Yes.
Member yields. The chair recognizes the member for Long Island.
I would like to clarify for this place before the member for Marathon continues to say that there is opposition. Mr. Speaker, the reality of the matter is there is no opposition from this side for the training of Bahamian people. The whole concept of BTVI is, in fact, a training ground for training. And Mr. Speaker, also, we also had in place the continuing education courses from COB, which ensured that persons can move from one place to another to get the requisite literacy and numeracy.
Members,
Speaker, he is misleading the public, because when you talk about small engine repairs, when you talk about cosmetology, when you talk about landscaping, those are all articulated in the BTVI Act. The minister needs to become aware with that act, Mr. Speaker, because it speaks to the training of those particular vocational and technical areas.
Very well. Member for Marathon. Member for Marathon, continue your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the member I'm very familiar with the BTVI Act. And as I stated, although the Act was brought into force over a year and a half before they left office, they did not appoint the first board member to make sure that what they brought into force was integrated into BTVI. And Mr. Speaker, the fact that
Member yields. The chair recognizes the member for Long Island.
Point of order. At Section 5, at Clause 1 and 2, 2 particularly, speaks to the training for construction trades, mechanical trades, handicrafts, ornamental landscaping and horticulture, maritime trades, technology, commerce, cosmetology and personal grooming, information communication technology, and other categories that may be extended. Mr. Speaker, this is the Act for BTVI of 2010.
Very well. Member for Marathon, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm not denying that BTVI does all those things and more. The point I'm making, and maybe the member doesn't quite appreciate it, we're talking about a national training agency which is responsible for accreditation and assisting persons with directing them into places like BTVI and other institutions. This is an umbrella organization which will oversee the training from a national perspective of Bahamians. This is not something that we're inventing, Mr. Speaker. This is something that exists through developed countries throughout the world, which ensures, from their perspective, from a national policy perspective for government, that it is on top of the training needs of its country, and it helps to assist and direct persons in various institutions which offer those courses, Mr. Speaker, and accredits them to ensure that at the end of the day, when persons come out of those courses, Mr. Speaker, they have the certification that not only, as the member for Golden Gate said, will afford them the opportunity to work here, but they can carry that accreditation anywhere in the world from City and Guilds, Mr. Speaker. And so this is a effort to bring all of this together under one umbrella. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, we started off from the premise that we were going to increase double our investment in education training. And I heard the member talking about BTVI, Mr. Speaker. All during the time they're talking about for BTVI, Mr. Speaker, with all the training that they were doing, all these different things, Mr. Speaker, the enrollment at BTVI was not growing, Mr. Speaker, not expanding at all.
Right.
This year, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the member for Long Island on the point of order.
The member for Mount Moriah is telling an absolute
member for Marathon
is telling an absolute mistruth, because many members of that training program that we offered was many members.
We'll correct that. Thank you, honourable member. Member from Long Island will continue.
And grew the enrollment of BTVI at that time in many of these areas that I just articulated. Unless he has the data to substantiate what he is saying, I suggest that he comes back later, but withdraw those particular words, because we know that we knew that we grew the enrollment, sir, and they can speak to that.
Thank you, honourable member. Member for Marathon.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell you is this. This year, when this administration came into office, between May of last year and today, enrollment at BTVI has grown by 25+%. 25+% in one single year. Now that is without a shadow of a doubt. Now, with regard to the programs that they were offering, Mr. Speaker, they were placing people in those programs, but the enrollment was not expanding, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you that. Was not expanding. Now, it has gotten so bad now, Mr. Speaker, that we have had to try and make provisions for two things. First of all, to move the cadets out, the technical cadets out of BTVI and find some other accommodation for them. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we now have the plans to expand BTVI with a 10 classroom block, which we intend to start this year, Mr. Speaker. And so through the involvement and financial commitment made by this administration, BTVI the enrollment has expanded. We are training more persons. We are offering more courses. We are spread more throughout the Family Islands. We will continue to do so, Mr. Speaker. So there can be no doubt in anyone's mind with regard to this government and this administration's commitment to training. Mr. Speaker, this goes well, Mr. Speaker, with the career path academies that the Ministry of Education has decided to expand on. You will recall in our Charter for Governance, we made a commitment to expand our career path academies throughout our senior high schools. And what this is, Mr. Speaker, is that we have taken a proactive approach now to ensure that these technical and vocational subjects and courses are taught now at a senior high school level. We've got a few magnet schools that have been doing it for the last couple of years with great success. And now we are expanding that over the next couple of years. It was made possible through a loan that was negotiated by Minister Alfred Sayers with the IDB in order to outfit our schools to ensure that we're able to teach more courses in carpentry, in hospitalities, in cooking, sewing, electrical, mechanical, drafting, and so forth, Mr. Speaker. And we have put those into the schools in order to expand that. And so we're now looking at it from a more holistic approach, Mr. Speaker, making education more relevant even from the high school to begin to prepare these students for the career path that they want to go into. We will be able to take them to a certain level, Mr. Speaker, and we're talking now about having a basic certification level for them in these courses when they leave high school. So when they leave high school, once they've taken these courses, they will have a certification, and we're talking with city and guilds as well to see what that minimum certification is. So when they leave, they will already attain Tier 1 essentially, and then move on to BTVI or some other training institute for Tier 2, 3, and 4, if that's where the career path in the area of study or profession they want takes them, Mr. Speaker. So we're being very strong and aggressive with regard to that. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by just saying that The public-private partnerships are critical to the development of the Training Institute and also to the development of our educational system. And I want to commend those companies out there that have partnered with the Ministry of Education and those that will partner in the future and those who will partner with the National Training Agency. It makes a tremendous difference, Mr. Speaker, when a businessman or someone in the actual profession comes in and speaks directly with persons who are interested in that area or in that profession. It has a profound impact. They see firsthand what the rewards can be. The persons who come and speak talk about the challenges, talk about the discipline, talk about what they expect from their employees. And so it's not just a lecturer lecturing. This is someone in the real world who is involved in this area, who is coming and speaking with our students. And so I want to encourage them to continue to get involved. Those who are given financial assistance, I applaud them, and I want to encourage more to do the same. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the most important pieces of legislation that we will probably table during our 5 years in office, Mr. Speaker. This piece of legislation sets the framework, sets the regulatory body, sets the organizational framework for our National Training Agency. All the reports that we have received, Mr. Speaker, show that training, and as the member for Golden Gate said, it's just not training with regard to skill. It's the soft skills training that we need as well, Mr. Speaker. The attitude, understanding the importance of showing up to work on time, understanding that you have to talk with respect to your fellow employees and also to those who supervise you, Mr. Speaker. How you dress, Mr. Speaker, that's a part of training too. How you dress and present yourself to work, Mr. Speaker. And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, it's not that some of our young people intentionally show up to work not dressed appropriately. A lot of times that they just don't know. They just don't know. Yeah, they just don't know how to dress to appear to work. They don't know, Mr. Speaker. And so part of this agency, Mr. Speaker, is ensuring that there are institutions that these persons can go to that will prepare them properly to be presented to the workforce so that we can move further and further away from having to employ and bring members and having to bring non-nationals in to do jobs, really, Mr. Speaker, what Bahamians are more than capable to do. So I applaud the member for Golden Gates and the Minister for Labor for bringing this piece of legislation forward, which is critical. I applaud Ms. Marcel for the role she's played over the years and the role she'll continue to play, and all those who will be a part of this training, a national training agency. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I support this bill.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama. On a point of information, as it relates to the member from Martha. Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. The Minister in his contribution just now indicated that I guess his ministry is constructing 10 classrooms, I think he said, at the BTVI campus. I just wondered if he can point to us in the budget under which head we can find the funds allocated for that construction. It's information. I just want information.
Very well. The member is obliged. The member has the floor. The member from Marathon has the floor. The Chair recognizes the member from Marathon.
Mr. Speaker, in the budget, we have their line items within the Ministry of Works and Education for expansion and building of new schools and campuses. We listed some of them, but it's not a complete list. At the end of the day, members would know that during the course of the year, you have certain plans, and you don't list all of the things you have. But I can tell you, the construction that will start during this year, the cost of it is already estimated at 1.5. All of that will not come out of the budget this year. but we will start it during the course of this year, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Pine Ridge. The member yields. The Chair recognizes the member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, we would like to suspend for the luncheon suspension until 3 p.m. 2013.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Do we have a second? Second. It's moved and seconded for the business of this House suspense until 3 p.m. this afternoon on the 26th day of June. As many are in favor, as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
All right.
Morning session here, debate on the National Training Agency bill, listening to the member for Marathon, the Minister of Education, Science and Technology, explaining the importance of, well, what he called probably the most important piece of legislation that this government will bring to Parliament during its 5-year term in office. Difference between a national training agency responsible for training for the entire country and directing how that training should happen, not only with one institution but several institutions, which again is one of the main purposes of the National Training Agency. Again, the National Training Agency will not be training anyone. The National Training Agency will be directing people to places to be trained. July 15th is when the training agency will be launched. Again, we heard Agatha Marcel, the former MP for South Beach, to be the director. The idea is 4 core areas, including hospitality and tourism, retail, office procedures, and auto repair. Those will be the core areas they will focus on initially. They want to get about 400 to 600 persons in there that they're going to direct initially. Eventually, the goal is to train between 2,000 and 2,500 persons every year. Again, they won't be doing the actual training. They will be directing people to various agencies to be trained. They will also be monitoring them, of course, and eventually giving them certificates. Of course, these places that will be training will also have to be accredited by this National Training Agency. Of course, the member for Long Island saying that the apprenticeship bill and the BTVI bill pretty much covers whatever's there. Again, the government disagrees. And of course, the member for Marathon, the Minister of Education, Science and Technology, explaining the difference between those two bills and what the government is now envisioning. Again, members will return at 3 o'clock this afternoon to continue debate on this bill. If it's not done today, we expect it will be done tomorrow, but we'll have to wait and see what happens when members return at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So on behalf of the team here at the Parliamentary Channel, I'm Anthony Newbold. Enjoy the remainder of your afternoon. We'll see you back here at 3 o'clock.